Is it possible that somehow the blood sample was not even Henri Paul's? To this day, the French have refused any independent evaluation of Paul's blood.
The smoking gun for this investigation would be evidence that the blood tested was not that of Henri Paul's. There were 15 bodies in the morgue that night, and the level of carbon monoxide supposedly in Paul's blood would be more indicative of someone who had committed suicide by breathing in a car exhaust. The French government, however, will not release any information about any of the other victims so that we can confirm whether or not the blood was actually Paul's.
If the evidence of this just being your average, everyday alcohol, drugs, and excessive speed accident suddenly appears to be on shaky grounds, could it be the crash was, in fact, a deliberate act, a conspiracy to murder Diana? And why did French authorities try to blame the crash on the dead driver, Henri Paul?
The police arrested some of the paparazzi at the scene, firstly for failing to render assistance at the scene, the Good Samaritan law, and secondly, invasion of privacy. But 2 years later, the judges dismissed all charges against the paparazzi. Since the judge found Henri Paul rather than the paparazzi responsible for the crash, no further investigations or public trials have taken place. Consequently, thousands of pages of investigative material have been kept from the public, and there's been no opportunity to question any of the witnesses or any part of the report.
From the moment Diana and Dodi arrived in Paris on August 30, the paparazzi seemed to know their every move in advance. Were they somehow tipped off about the movements of Diana and Dodi prior to the crash? If they were, by whom?
Many people are suspicious about intelligence agencies, in large part because I listened 2 years ago in Washington to an innocuous portion of a taped conversation between Princess Diana and a friend of hers, made available to me by an American intelligence officer who said that they were part of a series collected by the National Security Agency.
When Princess Diana and Dodi returned to the Ritz Hotel owned by his father, at about 10 o'clock on that Saturday evening, there was a throng of paparazzi outside the front of the hotel. After the crash, we reconstructed the video footage to show who was actually watching them. And among it was two men who have never been identified. And we believe that these two men were possibly from the security services.
Meanwhile, the Ritz Hotel called Henri Paul, head of security for the Ritz Hotel, who was then off duty, but apparently decided to come back to work immediately. But there are more question marks surrounding Henri Paul. For example, was he actually an intelligence operative?
I know that Henri Paul worked for MI6, the British intelligence unit that I worked for. I saw his name in files in 1992 on an operation that I was working on, and he worked for MI6 right until his death.
According to an American law enforcement official and an American intelligence officer, Paul spent the several hours before the accident with an officer from the DGSE, the French equivalent of the CIA. During the meeting, Paul was paid. He had about $2,300 on him in his pocket when he died. According to two American sources, he discussed Dodi and Diana that night with his French security officer.
Henri Paul had numerous Paris bank accounts totaling over $300,000, which seems to suggest he not only led a double life, it was also steady and lucrative. Did American intelligence officers know the movements of Henri Paul? Can it be proven, in spite of official protests, that American intelligence was watching Diana and Dodi while they were in Paris? The plot, if indeed that's what it turns out to be, thickens. When we return. What started as a brief trip to Paris quickly turned complicated and disastrous for Diana and Dodi. Back at the Ritz Hotel, a decoy plan was devised to evade the growing crowd of paparazzi waiting outside. But whose plan was it?
At about 20 minutes past midnight, Princess Diana and Dodi left the Ritz Hotel to return to Dodi's apartment. It's not clear why the couple decided to leave the Ritz. In a phone conversation, Mohammed Al Fayed told Dodi to stay there that night. The Mercedes was to leave from the rear of the Ritz, while the paparazzi focused on the limo at the main entrance. It was plain that neither Mohammed Al Fayed nor London Security Control would have approved. Both Wingfield and Rhys-Jones confessed that they did not notify London of this ill-conceived plan which was contrary to all outlined procedures and instructions. Curiously, instead of taking the most direct route to Dodi's apartment from the Ritz Hotel, which was up the Champs-Élysées, it is possible that agents told Paul to drive the other route alongside the River Seine. Henri Paul knew every inch of the road from the Ritz to Dodi's apartment. He certainly would not have willingly taken the Alma Tunnel route, which would have meant going away from Dodi's apartment. As the Mercedes approached the Alma Tunnel, chased by a car and at least one motorcycle, his final exit route to the right, to the Champs-Élysées, was blocked by a motorcycle, which forced him to drive into the Alma Tunnel. There was a white Fiat Uno waiting at the mouth of the Alma Tunnel, and as the Mercedes approached, the Fiat Uno edged over the centre lane, forcing the Mercedes off course. At the same time, a motorcycle pulled in front of the Mercedes, and an eyewitness has said that there was a huge flash which blinded Henri Paul. The combination of speed and the blinding light, along with the intervention of the Fiat Uno, pushed Paul off course, and the Mercedes crashed into the 13th concrete pillar in the tunnel. The paparazzi arrested at the crash claimed that they could not keep up with the Mercedes and were nowhere near when it passed into the tunnel.
Is it possible that the motorbike and white Fiat Uno only looked like frenzied paparazzi pursuing the Mercedes, but were really agents with an entirely different purpose? When former MI6 agent Richard Tomlinson heard about the Alma Tunnel crash, it seemed eerily similar to an MI6 plot he had seen earlier designed to assassinate a political leader.
I saw a plan to assassinate Serbian leader Slobodan Milosevic, virtually identical to what happened in the Alma Tunnel. It proposed using a powerful laser strobe to disorient Milosevic's driver as he went into a road tunnel in Geneva. A tunnel is a perfect place for an assassination because there are fewer witnesses. The Alma Tunnel is also ideal because there are no crash rails along the central pillars, so it's a death trap.